Robert Monster is the CEO and president at DigitalTown. He became the CEO in 2015, bringing significant experience with him. His many, many accomplishments, among which he has founded and served as managing director of Monster Venture Partners and the Global Marketing Institute. And prior to that, he was the global product development manager at Procter & Gamble, and he's recognized as Ernst & Young's 2016 Entrepreneur of the Year. So can you please give him a very, very warm welcome to the stage? I know it's late, but please muster all the energy you have. Please welcome Robert Monster.
Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here. About 2 weeks ago, I was in Budva, Montenegro, doing a TED Talk together with my colleague, Ruben Vergara-Meerson. And we got an invitation on that Saturday to go the next day to participate at the Liberland detainee. And that was a wonderful experience where I had an opportunity to meet so many innovators that are doing such novel things in the area of decentralized internet. And Mike Kostas was kind enough to suggest that I would come present to you the next time. So my talk today is actually somewhat inspired by the TED Talk that I delivered in Budva, and I hope you enjoy it. So this is a tiny house. If you were to go based on the number of different television programs that you see these days about tiny houses, you might think that everybody wants one. Now, the funny thing about the tiny houses is that the city planners are quite excited about the fact that so many people are showing an interest in moving into tiny spaces. But their idea is a little different. It looks more like this. This is a micro apartment building, and they're going up all over the world, many of them strategically located within walking distance of public transportation. Now, the irony of these micro apartments is that the space is actually quite small. How small, you ask? Well, about the size of a jail cell. The actual recommended minimum size for a prison cell is 70 square feet, and you see the comparison of both a typical micro apartment and a so-called net flat. Now, we're not just getting used to living into smaller spaces, we're also getting accustomed to a whole new vernacular around the sharing economy, co-working, co-living, the gig economy, and mobility as a service. While at the same time, the super yachts are big and getting bigger. This is the Azam super yacht. It clocks in at around 540 square foot, almost the size of 2 football fields. Now, in general, the plutocrats are having a pretty good decade. We have about 2,200 billionaires at last count, accounting for about $9.1 trillion. And what you're generally seeing now is the pattern of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. Now, the rest of us are engaging in a sharing economy like never before. Now, it doesn't actually have to be this way. If we actually contemplate how we got here, we can begin to reconcile how do we get from where we are today to a more sustainable future. So what's really going on here? Let's break it down by looking back at some history. If you go back to around 1972, you will see that there was a very significant deviation. Now, some people point to this as being an event that is tied to Nixon taking the world off the gold standard in the US, but whatever the root cause was, you have a very significant departure where the historical pattern of labor participating ratably in the progress and productivity no longer participating in the same way. In fact, you see that wage growth actually stagnated ever since. Now, as you look ahead, you'll also see that the impact has been on ever more income concentration. And you see that this is not just a local pattern isolated to a few geographies. It is, in fact, a global problem and converging to a significant degree. Now, the social contract that many people rely upon to be able to live a certain lifestyle has also been substantially funded through a combination of deficit spending, but also what you see is the resulting erosion of public capital, to the point that we now have several nations, the US and the UK, that now actually have a net public deficit from the standpoint of the public capital. Now, the net result of this is that for the first time since the records have been kept, youth are now actually less optimistic about the future than people who are 55 or older. Now, the net result of this is in fact something that might be a little bit concerning to some of you, which is what I would characterize as a sort of plutocracy. Now, the plutocracy, whether this actual game exists or not, if it were to exist, I believe the object of the game would be to create as many losers as possible. Now, if you think about it, there are in fact a lot of losers. Now, many of these so-called losers may be contemplating something that you've heard a little bit about lately, which is the notion of a universal basic income. No work, free stuff. What could possibly go wrong? Well, in the immortal words of Davy Crockett, a government big enough to give you everything you want is also big enough to take away everything you have. And whether you have a lot or a little, all of us have the notion of sovereignty. Now, sovereignty being the right to live where you like, do the work that you enjoy, and believe what you want is something that is, in fact, in many ways codified in our very being. Now, the pursuit of sovereignty has taken many forms. Many people are engaging in the area of digital nomads life. There are about 8 million according to latest counts, but an expectation that that could actually rise to 1 billion by the year 2035. Earlier today, you also heard about Liberland and the whole notion of people basically taking a page out of Ayn Rand's book, Atlas Shrugged, and essentially establishing their own sovereign nation. And we have a resident in the room. Randy, where are you? There in the back, the authoritative expert on seasteading. And indeed, we see that also taking shape. Now, it begs the question, how could we possibly restore sovereignty to cities where we already live, as opposed to being quite so inventive? Well, in the words of Buckminster Fuller, the idea of you never change things by fighting the existing reality. If you really want to change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So let me share with you a few specific thoughts around the new model. First of all, buy local. That sounds somewhat obvious, but actually 3.5 times more revenue stays in a local economy when you buy local versus buying through, say, for example, a chain. Second is the idea of bypassing the so-called extraction economy. Many people are using services like Uber, which started out at a very benign 5% commission, but now in fact charges up to 50% and in some cases even more. Expedia, which started out at a very benign 8 to 12%, now charges independent hoteliers up to 40%, paying them net 60 after say. So we can bypass the extraction economy and keep more money in the local economy as well. A third theme is the whole theme of redeploying capital that is accrued through the ongoing operation of businesses. We can engage in the practice of peer-to-peer lending, also public banking, as a common practice to be able to redeploy capital that is currently seeking yield that the local banks, to a large extent, are incapable of providing. And, of course, in order to be able to facilitate this type of transition to a kind of shared experience, there's the idea of creating a true culture of co-creation within local economies, further reinforced by shared ownership through mechanisms such as cooperatives, and enhanced further through the notion of single sign-on, where the login that you use for one particular application or use case can also seamlessly be applied to several other use cases, both on the public sector side and on the private sector. And then finally, the idea of global interoperability. Many of us grew up with the experience of sister cities, which were largely built around the idea of cultural exchange. But in fact, in the digital age, we can go one step further, achieving a sort of digital interoperability, where as we go from city to city and town to town, our user experience also is portable. Now, it raises the question, what if we could apply these particular experiences and be able to bring them together under one unified experience, whereby the traditional extraction economy now becomes a sort of relic of an age gone by. And in fact, that is precisely where I believe the opportunity resides for restoring local economic sovereignty. But we need a couple of enabling capabilities. First of all, of course, there's blockchain. And I don't think anybody here can underestimate the impact of blockchain. But what's more notable is the idea that says next generation blockchain technologies will be able to provide a level of performance that actually far surpasses what is currently in existence. Platform cooperativism Another emerging trend can best be described through the example of Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas, in fact, deployed a solution based on every city, in this case Austin, being its own Uber or its own Lyft. And in fact, by doing that, was able to provide a better economic arrangement for both passenger and driver. Which brings me to a brief introduction of DigitalTown. DigitalTown is built around the idea that every town, village, and city can be its own Google, Amazon, Expedia, OpenTable, Airbnb, PayPal, and Coinbase, all in one, branded in the identity of the city, running on web and mobile, and owned by the citizens. Now, to the casual observer, this particular platform may look like a typical travel guide. But in fact, the idea here is that the platform provides a vehicle by which every citizen gets its own sovereign identity. You control who knows what about you for how long. Every citizen gets a smart wallet working in both fiat currency and cryptocurrency. Every merchant gets a free storefront across retail services, dining, and lodging, working both online and offline. And every citizen can participate in peer-to-peer transactions using without commission for making these payments. Now, community tools are also integrated for allowing any citizen to initiate a project, to be able to allow that project to be participated in by other participants. So, and then in the ownership of the platform is made possible through the notion of a blockchain-based city share. So, in fact, people can claim their city shares for free and be able to buy and sell them peer-to-peer. And lastly, interoperability across both public and private use cases. So in conclusion, I will simply say that in my personal assessment, the future is bright. On the one hand, the UN is forecasting a scenario that by 2050, 70% of humanity is to live in tightly packed urban spaces. But in fact, I envision a different alternative. An alternative that doesn't necessarily bring us all into tight packed micro apartments, but rather a world of people-centric cities, a world of thriving sovereign local economies, and a world of co-creating abundance. But I would say, in conclusion, that the most significant thing about the future to believe in is, in fact, you. We individually, collectively, have the ability to affect this outcome. So that's a wrap. I appreciate your input. I also direct you to dt.city if you would like to learn information about our public stock offering. The company is, in fact, publicly traded on the OTC, ticker symbol DGTW. And hopefully you find that interesting as well. So thank you very much.